From Senator Lindsey Graham's town hall meeting on Saturday to terrorism to healthcare, 1st Congressional District candidate Tom Perez sits down with me one-on-one for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. Tom, it is so good to see you.
Thank you so much. It's great. I'm so happy you're having me back again. It's a good time.
Anytime, because obviously there's a lot of critical issues from the local front as well as the national front. Let me take you back 2 days ago to the Cooper River Bridge Run Day. As you know, Senator Lindsey Graham held a town hall meeting at Trident Technical College. And you actually tweeted out this later on, quote, "At the Lindsey Graham Town Hall, he's holding his own in front of a disrespectful, foul-mouthed group. Hashtag counterproductive." Tell me, where did your heart go to when you heard those vocal people?
Well, it went to my country and it went to my community, and to see the fractured nature of our party as well as our country. And we saw it in the primaries, the fissures that are there within the Republican Party, but also in the country.
Right.
And the Democrats obviously saw their fissures in their party between Hillary and Bernie Sanders, and we saw it in our party. There was some coming together after the election, but then what we've seen recently with the debates about healthcare, that there's still some fractured nature in our party that we need to work through. But speaking to the town hall, I was there. I went there right after I spoke at the Berkeley County Republican Breakfast,
right.
And so and the Berkeley County Republican Breakfast is a it's a great event, and a lot of people getting along, eating breakfast, talking about. There's a lot of civil discourse going on, but a lot of talking about the issues and what's going on, and then you showed up there, and man, it was a raucous crowd. I was one of maybe 5 Republicans.
Wow.
And to about 200 or so Democrats. And I say Democrats, but they could have been Green Party or any, but they definitely weren't conservatives.
Okay.
And many of them were very angry. And I don't want to paint with a broad brush. The guy sitting next to me, a gentleman named Ben, who's a developer from the old village.
Right.
Nice guy. We had a good conversation. We were on opposite ends of the political spectrum, but we had a nice conversation. But that was definitely not the norm that day. And there was one little girl got up to ask a question. She was in the 7th grade. And then after she asked the question, and when Senator Graham was trying to give his response, people just started yelling, and they were yelling obscenities, and they were yelling all kind of stuff, and this girl's in 7th grade.
Right.
And there's people yelling obscenities and nasty stuff. And I think that civil discourse is a pillar of democracy. We have to have it in order to have a functioning democracy.
Sure.
But civil discourse, we need to work with our government and support our government. Now, support doesn't mean that you blindly agree with everything that your president says and does, but it doesn't mean that you fight him every step of the way either, and it doesn't mean that you huff and puff and stomp your feet when you're not getting your way,
Right.
just because you lose an election. So we need to concentrate, and part of my campaign actually is to try to find the common ground on not just within our party, but within our country, between the Republicans and Democrats. I think there is a lot of common ground that we can work toward and try to heal as a nation, because I think the biggest challenge to us as a country and as a party in the Republican Party is coming together. And we tend to come together in times of strife and turmoil, like in September 11th or Pearl Harbor, things like that. We come together when we've been threatened by a foreign adversary, but it shouldn't take the loss of American life for America to come together as one nation. But that's something that I would like to see.
You talk about Berkeley County. Let me take you to Lansing.
Okay.
This very, very disturbing story here. A Charleston man was arrested on ISIS charge. You later said this, quote, "Need to keep Gitmo open and support the fight against ISIS." So how does that fight begin?
Well, it's already going on. What I would like to see regarding ISIS over there, and then there's 2 parts of it. There's the home front, and then there's the fight in Iraq and Syria.
Sure.
Mosul is still being controlled by ISIS, and a number of other countries, a number of cities and areas in that territory that's controlled, which is basically northern Iraq and eastern Syria. And we've seen the I'll call them the allies, but the fact that the Russians and the French and even the Americans who are fighting against ISIS, they've made some strides, but what really needs to happen in the region is for the countries in and around Iraq and Syria to stand up and to do something about it. We're not seeing that at all. And if you look at Iraq and Syria on a map, you've got Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Lebanon, and who's doing most of the heavy lifting? U.S., Russia, France, Jordan a little bit.
Right.
But by and large, you're seeing Western powers coming in to the Middle East and fighting ISIS. And we could go in with some massive airstrikes and kill everybody, but that's not going to kill the idea. And that's not going to kill the thought process. And that's what needs to happen. And we, the Western nations, we're not going to be able to win that. So what really needs to happen, what I'd like to see, is more pressure being put on the global Islamic community, and namely those countries, to stand up and start doing something about it. Whenever there's a terrorist attack, be it in San Bernardino or Orlando or Paris, you hear a lot of people stand up to defend Islam in the court of public opinion. ISIS is not Islam. Islam is not ISIS, and trying to draw that distinction. And I agree with that. I have some very good friends of mine who are Islamic faith, but it's still it's an Islamic problem. And we're not talking about the Buddhist state in Iraq and Syria or the Hindu state in Iraq and Syria. They're calling themselves the Islamic State, and they're using rhetoric from, albeit twisted rhetoric, from the Quran to justify their actions. They're recruiting from mosques, not from churches or synagogues. And so I would like to see the global Islamic community take more onus and start working more within their own community, the global community, to address the problem from within. Because until we start doing that, we can go out killing people, but one, that's not going to solve the problem, and two, you're going to have a lot of collateral damage to that, because we're talking about terrorists. It's not like they're out fighting on a battlefield wearing uniforms.
Right.
They're in and amongst civilian populations, and it's incredibly difficult to root people out like that. And so that's what I would like to see be done, is kind of the hearts and minds. And we can try as we might to build wells and to build churches and schools and things of that nature, and that all helps, but really the hearts and minds has to come from within the Islamic community, and I'd like to see them stand up and do more on that front. And that's from the global initiative. Interior, like what we're seeing with this particular article, this guy was from Ladson.
Yeah.
He'd been arrested once before at age 16 on a gun charge. Wow. And he was let go, even though all the prosecutors said this guy's really dangerous, we don't need to let him go. And a couple months later, after they let him go, he was arrested by the FBI Counterterrorism Task Force at Charleston Airport. And so far, I haven't read about what he was planning to do and what even what airplane he was on. If he was going to hijack an airplane, we weren't sure. But I think that should highlight that the problem isn't just over there; it's over here too. And in speaking to Gitmo, what I was referencing there is there was about 775 detainees brought to Gitmo originally. Of that, the vast majority have been released. There's about 30 left sitting there. Of the 740 roughly that have been released, we confirmed that about 30% of those have returned to terrorist activities. Wow. And have even killed American citizens. So we had these people in captivity in Guantanamo Bay. They've been released, and they've gone out to continue. 30% has been confirmed to return to terrorist activities and have gone on to kill Americans. Now, some of those, I say released, of the 740, some of those are in detention centers in other countries. Okay. They were just transferred overseas. So they weren't all released. But of the 740 that are no longer at Gitmo, 30% we know have returned to terrorist activities. And that's a huge problem. And so one thing I'd like to clear up that's been a misnomer.
Sure. Every
detainee at Guantanamo Bay has been through a CSRT, which is it's a tribunal, right. Essentially. They've all been through that. There's some misinformation out there saying they haven't been through military tribunals. They have, all of them. One of the detainees that's still there is a guy by the name of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was the architect of the 9/11 bombing. Right. He's still there. And the 9/11 attack, excuse me. And there's been some discussion about indefinite detention. If someone kills 3,000 Americans, as far as I'm concerned, they should be indefinitely detained. And that's the kind of people that we have down there. These aren't just innocent high school students or college students that got caught up in a movement and were arrested for something that that they really have anything to do with. These are bad people that need to be taken care of. And if we close down Guantanamo Bay, there's only two places that these detainees can be sent to. Well, three. They can be released. They can be sent to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, or they can come here to the Navy brig. There's already been a bill passed in Congress. People may not know this, that in the Kansas State Legislature, that they're not going to take any detainees. That's already been set forth. So the only other place is here in the Lowcountry. And when we already have our own terrorist problems with our own homegrown terrorists right here in Ladson, we don't need to be bringing 30 more terrorists, some of the worst of the worst in the world, here to the Lowcountry. And that's something that I'm 100% against.
And what other discussions do you want to have on this particular issue?
About terrorism?
Yes, sir.
I think that we covered the highlights. And the big thing that I wanted to bring out about global Islamic terrorism, or just terrorism in general, is, and more importantly ISIS, is that we need to see more action from the region and from the global Islamic community. And those countries that I listed off earlier, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, they all have extremely powerful militaries and extremely powerful air forces. And if they could just coalesce and work together, they could take out ISIS like that. And then you have an Islamic group taking out a cancer in the Islamic community, rooting it out. And then they could really work with the other people in the region to do a much better mending of the hearts and minds than we ever could. And so that, I maybe sound like I'm a broken record, but that's what really needs to happen.
And what is the holdup? Is it politics, or is it that they just don't get along personally?
The second part there, they hate each other. So the Shias and the Sunnis hate each other more than they hate Westerners, and they've been at it for generations, for millennia. It's easy for me sitting over here talking to you in Charleston, South Carolina, to say you guys need to get along and figure it out. But it's going to take something, whether you take the moderate factions of each group to kind of start working it out. And there was some relief a couple months ago. Saudi Arabia said they stood up, I want to say, a 37-country coalition to combat terrorism. That was like 6 months ago. We haven't seen much out of it. And what kind of gave me a little chuckle was that when they made this announcement, the only person there giving the announcement was the Saudi Arabian defense minister. There was no other nations. It's not, normally you see like a bank of people and they're all standing together and getting along. You didn't see that. You see one guy up there. So that kind of made me think, is this really so much of a coalition? And since then we really haven't seen much. And we've seen more attacks, more ISIS attacks, more terrorist attacks. And ISIS is doing more of the, I like to call it outsourcing, because they don't have the resources now. They're actually under a lot of fire. They're under a lot of pressure right now, so they don't have the resources to send people out. So they're using social media. They're using the internet to try to recruit people like this fella in Ladson to go out and do these satellite attacks in other areas. And they're telling them, don't come to Syria right now. Don't come to Iraq. Stay there and start attacking in your local areas. And so that's something I think that we might see more of, is some of these more homegrown attacks, and that's a big concern for everybody. But yeah, I guess that's, did I answer your question over there?
Yeah. And I was thinking, okay, they're outsourcing, so what should we be doing?
Well, kind of what I'm recommending that we do over there is start reaching out to the Islamic community here in the United States. And so we're talking to the mosques. And I was up at CPAC in February, and I spoke to a lady. She's a Muslim, and she worked with the FBI for just that. She's in counterterrorism with the FBI, and she's a Muslim, and she's working that kind of liaison, trying to work with the mosques and the different Islamic communities in the country on a counterterrorism aspect. When we talk about counterterrorism, that's how to combat terrorism in the United States, and that's the FBI's job. The FBI takes care of counterterrorism within the United States. And so she's working with those groups to try to break down the barriers and say, if you're an imam, if you work at a mosque, if you're just an average citizen of America, and you see somebody who's maybe buying a lot of guns or doing something that's questionable activity, go ahead and speak up and bring that up to the FBI, because that's not something we want in the United States.
Right.
And so, more of that to communicate that, look, yes, you're Muslim and you're a proud Muslim and you're in Islamic community, but you're also an American.
Right.
And we all need to work together to keep America safe. All Americans.
Let me get back to home here, because obviously, we had a proud moment for Boeing the other day.
Absolutely.
You actually said this, quote, proud moment for South Carolina and Boeing, South Carolina. Describe Boeing in South Carolina in your mind in 5 years.
Juggernaut. I mean, they've really grown a lot. My wife works at Boeing. She's an IT project manager at Boeing. So we obviously love Boeing. She's over there right now. She had a meeting this morning.
Wow.
And so it's amazing to see them grow. And it's a really good marriage of the public sector company like Boeing, a massive company.
Right.
Working with the community and with the state. They came to a state that's a right to work state. They were tired of dealing with the unions, and they wanted to have a workforce that was free to do what they wanted to and to negotiate for themselves, and they got that. And it's continuing to grow. They're continuing to add people. They're continuing to add facilities over there and create more jobs. And one of the problems that we have here, and not just with Boeing, but in the knowledge sector job pool across the community, is there's actually more jobs than there are people to fill, which, that's a good problem to have.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to see some of the colleges, like the College of Charleston, start spinning out more people in STEM and things like that to start filling these technical jobs, particularly the technical jobs in computer science and cyber forensics, but also some of the jobs over at that we're seeing over at Boeing. But to your question, I think it's been I hesitate to say perfect, because there's no such thing as perfection,
Right.
but it's a very good marriage between a corporation, a community, and a state to work together to create jobs and to grow the job market.